Welcome, everybody, to today's Shop Talk webinar with APPX. I'm just going to hand it over to Steve right away so we can get started. I'm just going to give you control. Let's start it again. Let's try that again. There we go.
Want me to skip past this?
Oh, yeah, we'll do a welcome, the presentation, a Q&A, and then our typical follow-up agenda items. So,
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Frizzell. I'm the Vice President of APPX Software located in Jacksonville, Florida. We have been a sponsor of COSA now for, I think, 12 or 13 years. And we've been working with different state archives for even longer than that, providing software solutions for various archives. Today, we're going to talk about potential uses of AI for processing of emails by state archives. Last year, our presentation focused on general uses of AI for state archives. So this year, we're much more focused. We're now talking specifically about emails, and how we can process large volumes of emails and facilitate that by using AI technology. The high-level outline that you see on the screen are the basic steps that you go through to process batch emails for an employee. So the first step is to ingest the emails, and then the second is to create a searchable, unprocessed email archive for that employee's emails. Now, when I say employee's emails, you're typically talking about the emails from his entire term of employment, perhaps 20 or 30 years worth of emails. At this point, emails go back almost 30 years, I think. And so once you've created an archive, then the challenge is to classify them, assign access restriction to them, assign a retention to them, potentially redact them if they're sensitive content. And then the final goal is to publish for public consumption and to preserve the permanent emails, preserve them for posterity. When it comes to processing emails, though, there's a big problem. And that problem is the volume of emails that we're talking about. One employee who's worked for 20 or 30 years can accumulate as many as 200 or 300,000 emails, maybe even more, depending on the position that the employee has. And so the volume really becomes the problem because it's not possible to manually process that many emails. You can't read 200,000 emails one by one and process them the way they need to be processed. And so the only solution for processing large volumes of emails is to have an automated system that can do that. An automated system can scale to process hundreds of thousands or millions of emails. Manual system cannot scale to that volume. You can't hire enough people. You can't fill enough rooms with people to process that many emails. So how do we start when we go to processing emails? So we're gonna have to create an archive. I mentioned earlier, create an archive of the emails for the employee. So we're going to ingest those emails. We're going to check them for viruses. We're going to extract the header information, the subject, the body. We're going to extract the attachments from the email. We're going to identify all the correspondence that were on the email, whether it's who it's from or who it's to, or CCs or BCCs. We're going to identify all of them. Once we've extracted all that information, we're going to put it into a Solr database and make it searchable using facets, the keyword search technology, and something that's probably new to a lot of you called vector search technology. And so the first goal is to make that email, is actually get that email ingested and make it searchable. The reason we need it to be searchable before we process it is because we have to go through a discovery phase with those emails. You have to review them and get to know them a little bit. You need to figure out, what did this person do during their 20 or 30 years as a state employee? And once you understand the content that you're looking at, then you can focus the processing more specifically based on the nature of the emails. So the discovery step is a pretty important step that leads to effective processing of emails. So one of the ways we can potentially use AI is to assist with this discovery process. So AI can review a large volume of emails and can classify them. It can look for various projects and programs and tasks that person worked on during their career. And it can classify the emails and put them into groups based on what the topic of the email is, the subject of the email. And so what you end up with, what you can end up with if you use AI in this manner is you end up with a timeline for the career of that person, highlighting every project, every program, every task that he spent time on, with all of that information being derived from the emails that he sent and received. There's no way you could do that manually. You couldn't review that many emails and classify them that way. So this is really a great potential use of AI for processing emails. And once you've done that, then you know what you're going to be processing. You know the content of those emails. You know the nature of them. So again, would be an AI use to assist with the discovery phase of email processing. So what do we mean when we refer to processing of emails? Well, to process emails, we first create a collection. And a collection could be emails for one person, or it could be the emails for a group of people. For example, it could be the governor and his immediate staff. You could create a collection that included the email archives for each of those individuals in the form of a single collection. And then you process them as a group. So when you process them, what you're talking about then is classifying them. Are they records or are they non-records typically? You want to assign an access restriction to them. You need to know, is this protected information? Is there private information in these emails? Can they be exposed to the public the way they are? Do they need to be redacted? You need to classify them by assigning labels to them that can be used to search for emails based on a category or a label that you've assigned. And you need to also ultimately create an access copy of the email that includes redactions if they're appropriate. And you need to create access copies of the attachments, potentially redacting them as well. And so processing of a single email can take a lot of time and effort if you're doing it manually. So our goal is that we want to find a way to use a computer system to do all of that so that you don't have to manually read those emails and perform those tasks yourself. So the goal of processing in the end is to make those emails publish them for public consumption so that the public can search for content and find information that they may be looking for. So it might be a reporter doing an investigative report of some type. He wants to search all the emails for some particular content. Could be legal research for some reason. So whatever the reason is, you can make these collections be publicly accessible as one of the final outputs from the processing. The other goal is to permanently export and permanently store the emails that have a permanent retention. And so you want to export them and import them into a preservation system such as Axiom or Preservica or Archivematica, a system that can actually preserve those emails. So the email processing that we're talking about doesn't necessarily preserve them, but it does prepare them for preservation. So here's a slide that shows you the basic things that we do when we're processing emails. And these are the things we want to automate. assigning a class, assigning a restriction, assigning a retention, assigning labels, and redacting. So the object here is to do these things without having to read the emails. Because again, there's no way you can read the volume of emails that need to be processed. So what can we do without using AI? When we started this email system about 3 years ago that we have, AI was just starting to become something that people talked about. And everybody was a little bit afraid of it and didn't know what it could do. And it was kind of like a voodoo magic thing. And so we didn't plan to use AI techniques from the beginning. And so we incorporated processing technologies based on keywords. So we allow you to perform a lexicon search. So you can define your own lexicons. You can define a medical lexicon, a legal lexicon, a lexicon of words that would identify family members, that kind of thing. And then you can process the emails against those lexicons and classify them based on the keywords that match. So if you see a lot of medical words matching, then you're going to classify that email as potentially being medically related. If you see a lot of legal phrases, then you're going to classify it as having legal content. So lexicon analysis uses keyword matching technologies to accomplish assigning of labels primarily, but it can also, as a side effect, assign access restrictions and classify as a record or non-record or assign retention. One of the other things you can do without using AI is you can do pattern matches, pattern searches. So you can define patterns such as a social security or a credit card or a driver's license number. The system can then find all the emails where that pattern exists, and it can automatically redact that pattern for you. So if it finds a Utah driver's license number, it can automatically redact it. If it finds a social security number, it can automatically redact it. And it will tell you that it did that. And if you want, you can tell it that you'd like to review those redactions, or you can accept them the way they are and not review them. So it's up to you. You have the control over how much review you want to perform. We can also do other types of processing based on things like who the correspondents are. A lot of times you see, when you look at emails for a person, you'll see that they get newsletters every week from different sources. Those newsletters are most likely not going to be considered official records. And so we can take the email address associated with the newsletter. We can tell the system that anytime we receive an email from that person, classify it as not being a record. And so you can eliminate large volumes of emails, or you can assign, classify large volumes of emails sometimes based on who they're from or who they're to, or also maybe based on domain names or hyperlinks that appear in them or URLs that are referenced by them. So the other thing we can also do is we can process the attachments without using AI. When I say process the attachments, I mean we can transform them from one format to another. So you might take a word processing document and transform it to a PDF format and let that be your access copy. And you could potentially redact that as well if it needed to be redacted before you allow the public to view it. Then we have what we call training-based assignment. Okay, so record classifications, access restriction, and retention can be assigned based on your review of a random set of emails. So we have a program where you can randomly read email after email and click a button that says, this one's a record, this one's not a record, this one is permanent retention, this one is not. And so once you've gone through a few hundred emails doing this, then the system can use those emails to decide if the other emails should be classified in a similar way. And it's done by basing the decision on keywords that are similar between the groups of emails. And so if we have an email that matches a lot of the keywords that are found in records, emails that are records, then those emails are likely to be classified as records. So again, it's a keyword similarity processing technique. It's reasonably accurate. But one of the downfalls of it is that you still end up with a large number of emails that potentially have to be manually reviewed to verify the accuracy of what has been assigned. So so that's one of the downsides of using keyword similarity processing to assign or classify emails. So what can we use AI for to get better results? So we can use AI to assign record class, to assign an access restriction, to assign retention to the emails. And we can do it automatically, not based on keywords, but based on the rules that you provide for doing that task. And so if you have rules that define your access restrictions, whether it's protected or private or controlled or public, if your archive has a set of rules that you use to make those decisions, you can enter those rules into the system. And then the AI will use those rules as it examines each email to determine if that email should be classified as private or restricted or controlled, public. And it does it by reading the email for you, just like you would. It reads that email, it understands the content of the email, then it reads the rules, understands the intent of the rules, and makes a decision for you as to whether or not that email should be classified one way or another. It is highly effective and very accurate. And you end up with a very small number of emails that need to be manually reviewed after it's completed. So when AI does a classification for you, it doesn't just assign the classification, it also gives you a confidence level. So it will tell you that it has made that decision with a high degree of confidence or a medium degree or a low degree of confidence. And so if it's got a high degree of confidence, you probably don't need to review it. But if it tells you that it assigned an access restriction with a low level of confidence, then you might want to flag that one for review just to make sure that it was right, because it's wondering if it's right when it says that confidence is low. It also tells you the reason that it classified the email that way. It gives you a summary of the content of the email. It says, because of this content, we're going to mark it private, or because of this content, we're going to allow it to be public. Then it tells you which of your rules were applied to make that decision. So it shows you the rule that came into play, and it shows you the content that matched the rule, along with the result that it assigned to the email. In addition to that, it can make recommendations to you about whether you should review that decision or not. And it can make recommendations about whether the content of the email requires redaction and review in order to redact it. And so when it's looking at an email and it sees that there's PII in it, or if it sees that there's other information that is confidential or medical or whatever it is, it can tell you that and tell you that you need to review it for potential redaction if you want to make it public. That's something that is really a powerful capability, being able to have the email tell you that. One of the problems with keyword matching is that keywords can match. You might say, yeah, this has medical content, so it needs to be considered private because it has this medical content in it. But maybe it's not really medical content. Maybe it's just something describing the state's policy with regard to some medical issue. And so as a policy email, it's not private. It shouldn't be private. But keyword match, you can't tell the difference. All it sees is that there's words in here that are medical. So it might falsely classify that email as being restricted when it doesn't need to be. AI doesn't make that decision. AI can read that email. It can tell that even though there's medical references in it, that they're related to policy, not to a medical condition. It can make that distinction for you. That's an important capability. So what do the rules look like that you have to give AI? This is an example of the rules for defining an access restriction of controlled. Okay, so if you look at it, you see it's a list of bullets and a description. And so the AI reads this and says, okay, here's my definition of emails that need to be classified as controlled. And so it can actually read this and understand it. It can read the email and apply these rules and say, yeah, this email needs to be marked as controlled. So it's an amazing capability to be able to do that. Here's a second example for an email that would be the rules that would apply to classify an email as being private. Okay, and so in this case, it has to do with medical and health information, personal employment information, PII, financial information. So all kinds of content that might require that the email be marked private. And again, the AI can digest and analyze these rules, apply them to the content of the email, and make a decision on whether they apply to that email or not. All right, so we've been, for the last couple of months now, we've been adding AI capabilities into our email processing system. And so far, we've added record classification capabilities so that AI can now tell us with a high degree of accuracy if an email is a record or a non-record. And we've also just finished adding in the access restriction processing, and it's able to differentiate between 8 different levels of access restrictions based on the rules that we provide and the content of the emails. And it tells you why it made that decision. And the explanation is important because that allows you to audit the result. Because if all it tells you is it's private and it doesn't tell you why, then you're going to have to read the email to figure out why did it classify this as being private. And so when it gives you a short 1 or 2 sentence explanation of why that email was classified as private, you've now got what you need to be able to audit the result that the AI assigned to the email. So this is an example here of the result of asking AI to assign an access restriction to an email. So the email that you can see over here on the left is one that shows up in my inbox every month. And it tells me that I am a subscriber to a variety of mailing lists that we host on our servers here. And that's not really private information. That's kind of a public notice that goes out to everybody in the company. But what is private is it includes a reminder of what my passwords are. It actually shows the passwords in that email. And so AI, when it analyzed this email, classified this particular email as being both public and private. And it explains why here. It says the email contains routine public mailing list instructions and subscription information, but also discloses the user's personal passwords for several mailing lists, which is identifiable personal information that must be protected. And so then the basis for the decision is that public mailing list instructions and private passwords. So that's why I classified, in this case, 2 different ways. And what you see here also is an example of after it classified it this way, it recommended redaction. There's a checkbox here that says review for redaction, yes or no. And so I went in and I told the system to redact those passwords. And so now what you're seeing is the redacted version of that email. The passwords are blocked out. So now I can safely publish this email if I want, knowing that the passwords are protected and the rest of the content isn't really private. This is another example of an email that was classified as protected with a high degree of confidence. No review is recommended and no redaction is recommended. And it tells you why it classified it as being protected. It contains some security related information about a server. And so it's concerned that this might be disclosing information that someone could use to hack into the server potentially. And so it's saying it's protected because security vulnerability information is contained in that email. And again, it's able to read that email compare it with the rules, and make this determination all on its own with a high degree of accuracy. This screen is an example of a public search program that could be used to search the published emails. And I'm showing it to you because it includes a search capability using natural language semantic search. So normally when you search, like on Google, you're typing in keywords, then you come back with a list of results that contain those keywords, and then you read them one by one. So what we're doing here is we're letting you type in basically a topic. And so my topic here says, I want to see the emails that have to do with COSA as a legislative advocate for state archives. And so it reviewed all my emails, and it found them and ranked them in order of most relevant to least relevant based on this content. Now, these words may not actually appear in those emails because the match has nothing to do with the words. It has to do with the content, the context. And so it looks at what I'm asking, and it looks at what the email talks about, and it says, yes, it's a match. It's not based on keywords. Now, if I wanted to do a keyword search, I could do that here in the keyword search box. I could type in certain keywords. I would only get emails that matched those specific keywords somewhere in their content or their subject. And so there's a very different capability for searching here. This one actually uses AI technology to do the search. It's called a vector search, if you're interested in the technical name of it. So one of the things that we run into is state archives and state government in general are really concerned about privacy when it comes to using AI. Everybody talks about how AI kind of takes your information, puts it out there, and everybody can potentially see it or see some version of it. And depending on your account with the online AI services, that is possible that if you start typing in things to Gemini or ChatGPT or Copilot, that those AIs might use that information for training purposes, or they might somehow disclose it in a response to somebody else. And so you need to really be sure when you're using an online AI that your account is truly private. Most of them have an option if you're paying for an account anyway. You can be reasonably sure that the account is private. But if you're using a free account, if you're not paying to use AI, you can pretty much be sure that they're going to share your information. They're going to use it. They're going to share it. And so a lot of state governments are very sensitive to using AI. And so the way we can overcome that objection is by using a locally installed AI model on your server. So you don't have to go through the internet and access one of the online internet services for AI. You can have your own private AI running on your server in your infrastructure. And that's called a local open LLM, large language model. And believe it or not, they're free. They're provided by a number of different AI companies, including Anthropic and Google and OpenAI and Microsoft. They all provide open LLMs that you can download for free and install and use on your own servers. And so we are building our system around these locally installed models so that there is no access to the internet required to use the AI capabilities. It's all private on your server inside your network. Nothing goes outside your network. Your emails stay under your control. They stay on your server. They don't go through the internet to be processed by an online AI somewhere. And by doing that, we're able to overcome the privacy and security issues that typically go along with processing records with an AI. The other thing is that we solve the cost problem, because the only cost is for your server. There's no cost for using the AI. One of the things I did was an experiment. I tested using the online AIs before we invested in our own server to do this. And besides being relatively slow because it was going through the internet, It was expensive. It would cost about a half of a penny to process one email. And if you're processing 200,000 emails, that's $1,000 every time you ask the system to process those emails. And when you're processing a collection of 200,000 emails, you're going to process it probably a half a dozen times by the time you get access restrictions assigned, record classifications assigned, retentions assigned, various labels assigned. So the cost of processing one collection of a couple 100,000 emails can very quickly become $5,000 to $10,000 if you're using an online AI service to do it. If you're using a local AI model on your own server, there's no cost per email. The only cost is for the server. So the goal of using AI is to minimize the manual review of emails. If you're going to be able to process emails efficiently and accurately, you need to be able to rely on the system that processes them without the need to review them, except in the cases where a decision cannot be made for some reason. For example, if the email says thank you, and that's all it says, you might have a hard time classifying it as far as how important is it. So sometimes an email like that, or an email that has very short content, might get marked as unable to classify. That's one of the results that the AI can give you. They can say, no, I couldn't classify it. And it would mark it as needing review by you. So the goal is to minimize those. And to the extent that we can control it, we're going to provide it with the rules that will give it the information that it needs to make decisions on all these emails. And so our ability to provide a good set of rules will determine the result we get with AI. If you give it a simple one-line rule, you're probably not going to get real good results. In the case of access restrictions, you saw two sections that I showed you earlier. There's about 20 sections to the rules that are used to classify. So that's like 20 pages of rules that are used by the AI to classify emails. And that's what it takes to really cover all of the different situations that determine if an email should be classified one way or another. So when I say we're adding AI capabilities in, we're not eliminating the other capabilities. We're just adding AI as an additional way that you can process emails. Because many of the capabilities that use the keyword matching or the similarity matching capabilities are still very, very effective and very accurate. And so, for example, if you want to classify emails as being non-records because they come from Costco, that's pretty effective. You can pretty much bet that Costco is a non-record. They're probably sending you the advertisement for the week or something. So there's some things you can do that you still would want to do that way. There's no point in having AI make that decision for you, although it can, but it's more effective to use the deterministic methods that pretty accurate for certain types of classifications. Lexicons in general are also pretty accurate. Pattern matches are definitely accurate, but they have limitations as well. Pattern match can redact a date if you tell it to. But if you want to redact just birthdays or death days, pattern match can't do that because all it can do is say, oh, here's a date. It doesn't know what kind of date it is. It just knows it's a date. And so pattern matching is somewhat stupid. It can find a pattern, it can redact it. And that, in a lot of cases, is very useful. But in other cases, it's not enough because maybe you want to redact a date only if it's a personally identifying piece of information, like a birth date or a death date or a marriage date or something like that. And so AI can tell the difference between the types of dates that are exposed in an email. And so So for the cases where you can't use deterministic or keyword similarity effectively, then AI really has a role to play because AI can make those other decisions for you. It can analyze the content of those emails, and it can analyze the rules that you've given it, and it can make really good decisions about how to classify those emails. And then finally, the fourth layer is the human factor. We always have to have a human who's in control of this. The AI is no better than the human who writes the rules or the human who has to review the emails that it wasn't able to classify. So we're not trying to eliminate the need for a human to be involved in the process of classifying emails or processing emails. What we're trying to do is allow you to use your time productively and effectively by doing things that AI and computers can't do, things that only a human can do. There's plenty of those things still left for a human to do when you're processing emails. So something else you can do with an automated system is you can compare results. For example, we could use lexicon to classify an email one way or another. We can use similarity concepts to classify emails. We can use AI to classify emails. Then finally, a human can classify an email. Then we can compare all four of those methods and see, do they all agree? And if they don't agree, why not? Why didn't the AI get the right answer? Or why didn't the similarity matching of keywords come up with the right answer? And so based on the analysis of the differences, you can refine your rules, you can refine your techniques to get better results as you go forward. So that's really one of the big advantages of using a computer system to process your emails. It can learn from its mistakes if you are willing to help with the analysis. So what's left for us to do? Well, we need to finish adding AI capabilities to our system. So we're going to add retention classification by AI. We're going to allow you to define rules for assigning labels. Right now, it can recommend when redaction is needed. I'd really like for it to be able to automatically redact things that it thinks need to be redacted. And that's going to take a little more work. That would be a goal that we would try to do as we go forward. We can automatically redact pattern matching because we know this is a social security number, it needs to be redacted, so we redact it. It's a little harder though for AI to actually do the redaction. It can tell you it needs to be redacted, but actually getting it to do the redaction for you is a little bit more of a challenge from a programming point of view. We also want to use AI to analyze the content of attachments, especially in those cases where the content of the email is insufficient for classifying the email. Like if you have an email that says, see the attached document, and that's all it says. Well, you better look at the document if you want to know what the email is about. And so AI can do that. It can actually look at a PDF, it can look at a Word document, it can look at an Excel spreadsheet, and it can see what's in there, and it can analyze the content just like it can analyze the content of an email. And it can use that information to classify the email. And so we're going to add that capability as we go forward. Then another area is the system already identifies email threads where the emails have physical links between them, like a reply to this email from another email. Internally, there's a link between those two emails when they're in a thread. But sometimes those links aren't there. Sometimes there's emails that are part of a conversation, but they're not an official thread per se. And so AI can actually find the emails that make up a conversation, whether they're threaded or not, and treat them as a conversation. And then you can classify the entire conversation as either being a record or requiring an access restriction to be applied to the whole conversation, not just to an individual email. So we're going to be looking at applying broader levels of classification, not just to an email, but to groups of emails based on some commonality between them. And I think these are just the beginning. We really um, are just learning what AI can really do when it comes to processing emails and other types of documents. And so I think these are the things that are very obvious, and we're going to implement them first. And once we get them implemented, we'll start looking for other opportunities to allow the processing to be even more effective and provide even more analysis of the content of those emails and what they represent. Um, of course, one of the things you want to be able to do too is measure how effective is the AI capabilities in the system. You want to know how accurate is it. Um, you want to know how many emails did I have to actually review? What percentage of them? What's the total number that I had to review? How long did it take me to do the review? You want to analyze the results for consistency. You want to make sure that the different methods of classifying agree with the result. And if not, uh, try and determine what you can do to make the rules better so they do agree. Then finally, you want to try and analyze the cost of processing the emails and the time that it took to do it. Um, so what you're going to find, of course, is that time is a huge savings. And without that savings in time, you wouldn't be able to process the emails because to do them manually would be just out of the question. Um, and so that translates into a substantial cost savings as well. And so I think most people will want to at least get some idea of um, what they do to what kind of results they're getting from a cost and a time saving point of view. So to summarize, one key takeaway is that we're not eliminating the need for human involvement in the processing of emails. We're using AI as a tool to facilitate the processing of emails. So we're not trying to eliminate the human involvement at all. In fact, it's very necessary. Um, we'll go back one slide. There. All right. So if you want more information about using AI techniques to process emails, we'll be happy to chat with you. We're going to be at COSA this year again. We'll have a booth set up, so feel free to come by the booth, and we'll try and find a time we can talk with you about different ways you might use AI. We can tell you more about our email processing system if you're interested in that. But we're always available to be a resource to help archives try to understand what they can use technology for. But anyway, that concludes my presentation. I hope you found it interesting. And now we're in the Q&A section. Do we have any time left? Not much. The sessions tend to go too long. Let's see if we have any questions. If we do, we can maybe take one or two. I can't see the questions here, so if there are any, Becky, you'll need to help me. There we go.
Thanks, Steve. If anybody has any questions, put them in the chat.
Okay, I've got the chat open so I can see that now. All right, so I guess I did a great job. Not any questions really pending, so I'll turn it back over to Becky and let her continue on with her part of the show.
Great, thanks, Steve. If anybody has any questions while I go over the last couple slides, go ahead and put them in chat and we'll make sure they get addressed. So mark your calendars. We have a lot of programming coming up over the next couple of weeks, month or so. The Appraisal Affinity Group, which is newly formed and meeting, is having their first meeting on August 31st. If you're interested in talking about all things appraisal, we are happy to add you to that group. If you're already in that group, hopefully you already know that they're going to have their first meeting on the 31st. Archivists who code are having their monthly meeting on September 1st. And the next state archivists call is September 3rd. The Preservica user group is meeting on September 21st. And the COSA annual meeting is coming up. So that'll be September 23rd to the 25th. And we have a lot of ways to get involved if you aren't already. Again, these are some of our newer affinity groups that are either just being formed or just getting started. I know the microfilm affinity group just had their first meeting right before this webinar. So if you missed that or you want to get involved in microfilm, you can reach out. Joy put in the chat where you can go to join a group, or you can also reach out to me if you have questions about that. We have a lot of other groups than just this, and we are trying to get an Apex users group started too. So be on the lookout for that. If you want to join that, or if you think you've already asked to join it, you probably have. We just haven't gotten it active yet. So don't worry, we'll get that going soon. And we have some working groups. We have a lot of working groups that you can join. These are the two that are the most in need of new members. The Tools and Resources group is going to start picking up their work here now with the revamp and rebuilding of our resource center. So if you like resources and access to resources and data, please think about joining that group and helping with that project. And the advocacy committee is always looking for people to help with advocacy. And again, the annual meeting registration is open. It's been open for a little while. Today is the last day for early bird registration. So if you've been waiting to register, but you still want to take advantage of that, make sure you get that registration in today. And as part of that, there is an Apex users group meeting before the conference that you can sign up to attend as well, if you're interested in that. And think about silent auction items. We always have a very successful silent auction, and it's only because our members and attendees help by providing items. So start thinking about that and what you might want to bring to the annual meeting if you are coming. And these are just all the ways to stay connected. Website, the community, Facebook, YouTube. If you've been trying to access the community and you're having trouble, please reach out to me and I will help you get to where you need to be. I think that's all we have for our slides. If there are any last minute questions for Steve, put them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you, everybody.